Welcome to OOD Works, the podcast, a show about unique individuals and the services provided by Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities, the state agency that helps individuals with disabilities find a job and be more independent. Here's your host, Kim Jump.
In today's episode, Jeremy Shapira and Kristen Ballinger discuss the unique partnership between Giant Eagle and Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities. Recently, Giant Eagle was named the 2019 Champion of Inclusion Award winner for their commitment to the inclusion of individuals with disabilities in the workplace and for being a leader of diversity and inclusion best practices in Ohio. Before we get started, let me tell you a little about Jeremy and Kristen. Jeremy Shapira manages Giant Eagle's inclusion and diversity strategy. He grew up in Pittsburgh and went to college in Philadelphia to study art history. During a 10-year stint in New York City, he worked in the theatrical design, advertising, and nonprofit fields. 13 years ago, he moved back to Pittsburgh to be with his family and work at Giant Eagle. He has had various responsibilities since then, including leading the human resources strategy for the company's Market District and Get Go brands, as well as leading talent acquisition and customer service. Building on Giant Eagle's nearly 40-year history of employing people with disabilities, Jeremy leads the company's disability inclusion strategy. Currently, he is focused on supporting and expanding the Embedded Inclusion Liaison project in each of the company's major markets and leading its Abilities Business Resource Group. He is particularly proud of Giant Eagle's successful partnership with Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities. Kristen Ballinger serves as Deputy Director for the Division of Employer and Innovation Services. She joined Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities as an Assistant Deputy Director for the Bureau of Vocational Rehabilitation in 2015. Prior to joining OOD, Ballinger worked for the Ohio Department of Developmental Disabilities in the Division of Policy and Strategic Direction, where she led Employment First. In this capacity, she was named a 2015 Employment First State Leadership Mentoring Program Ambassador for the U.S. Department of Labor's Office of Disability Employment Policy. Prior to her role at DODD, she worked as a Bridges to Transition Coordinator for the Knox County Board of Developmental Disabilities and later in a statewide leadership role with the Ohio Association of County Boards of Developmental Disabilities. Welcome to the podcast, Jeremy Shapira and Kristen Ballinger.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Well, we really appreciate, Jeremy, you making the drive from Pittsburgh.
Yes, our headquarters are in Pittsburgh, but at this point, we basically have the same number of stores in Ohio that we do in Pennsylvania. So obviously, Ohio is a huge state for us, and we've been here for many years, so it's good to be here.
Part of the reason you were invited to the podcast today was to talk about Giant Eagle being named the 2019 Champion of Inclusion Award. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. It is a wonderful award, and obviously we're extremely excited to be honored this way. I will also say that I am here on behalf of many, many people who made this possible. While I'm very happy to accept it, I just want to make sure that I recognize the amazing efforts of our team.
That's awesome. And I got to meet some of your team members at a Cleveland store a couple weeks ago. And I have to say, there was just such a sense of family and belonging in the store. Is that normal?
Well, I would like to think that it is. Giant Eagle started as a family company. The same 5 families that started the company are still involved today. And I think that carries through our almost 90-year history. And basically, you can walk into any store and see people that you recognize and know, and people know. Actually, it was my great-grandfather was one of the people that started the company. And it is very frequent that I hear people say, "Oh, I knew your grandfather and I knew your dad." And it's just that kind of company.
Diversity and inclusion is something that's been important to Giant Eagle for a long time.
Yes. First of all, we do it because it's just the right thing to do. We talk about our culture as a respect for people culture, not only respecting our customers, of course, but also respecting our team members and our vendors and our communities, et cetera. And we think of inclusion and diversity as really just a subset of respect. But it's also important to say that it's a critical part of running our business. At the end of the day, we know that our customer base is very diverse. And really the key to any business case when you're talking about inclusion and diversity is that you need to understand your customers. And if they're diverse, well, then we need to be diverse internally as well. We also think of diversity purely as a means to an end. And that it doesn't make sense to be diverse if you're not also going to be inclusive. We actually say, many companies out there say diversity and inclusion. We actually say inclusion and diversity because it's really inclusion that is really what we're after. When we're talking about people with disabilities, or as we say internally, people who are differently abled, and I think we should, at some point in this conversation, talk more about the distinction there and why we talk about that. The fact is that I'm sure many of your listeners know that 20% of Americans are people who are differently abled. And it's one of the reasons why we think employing people who are differently abled is so important, because we need to understand that experience so that we can best serve our customers. First of all, I fully admit it is not the perfect term. It is the reason why we introduced it, and we're certainly not the first company to ever do this. There are other companies out there that use the term as well. If you ask me what the biggest hurdle is for companies or for people who are differently able trying to get into the workforce, it has to do with fear and bias. And when companies focus on what people can't do rather than what they can, that's when it all sort of falls apart for employing people who are differently abled. So the reason why I think differently abled is an important distinction from the term disability is because, to me, there is actually bias built into the word disability. It just, when you think about the word disability, right, it just means that you can't do something, whatever that might be. And so as a simple nod to saying, frankly, everyone has abilities to do something, differently abled is just a way to recognize that and to start to try and remove bias from the equation. I will admit to you that when we started to introduce it, I actually got some pretty strong feedback about the term. There were two people in particular that I'm thinking of that gave exactly the same feedback, which was that the word different is bad because, when kids are in school, they're taught that being different is a bad thing and that you need to sort of conform or else you're going to be bullied or, kids are going to be mean to you, especially coming from a world where, I spend my entire day thinking about inclusion and diversity. If we are afraid of the word different, then I'm not sure why we're talking about diversity, because diversity is all about celebrating differences. Again, it's not the perfect term. Sometimes it's hard to use in sentences, frankly. I still think that it is better from trying to sort of move away from a world where bias plays too big of a role in the employment discussion. Well, my title is Strategy Manager of Inclusion and Diversity. So there is also a Chief Diversity Officer at the company, but I'm really the person that manages the activities day to day. It was in 2012 or 2013 that Giant Eagle was first approached by the United Way of Southwestern Pennsylvania to do a partnership with 21 and Able, which was an effort to hire high school students who are differently abled into our stores. And I will freely admit that I had just stepped into a new role. I was leading Giant Eagle's recruiting team at the time. And there, I felt like there were like 15 big projects that we really had to go do. There was just lots of work to get the recruiting team to where we needed it to be. But my boss said that I had to lead this one project. And I was just reluctant because I had so much else to do. And so, I said yes, of course. My boss said I had to do it. So, of course, I did it. The project got started. I really wasn't paying that close attention to it. There were some other people that I was working with internally who were helping get it off the ground. And then about 6 months later, we hired our first student out of the program. And I went into the store where the person was working and met the person for the first time. And all of a sudden, this huge light bulb went off. And I started to realize that I didn't have to do a ton of work to make this happen. It was immediately apparent to me that not only does the company win from this, but the person who was just hired wins from this. Their family wins, the community wins, and basically just everyone around this person wins simply by helping this person into the workforce. Mm-hmm. I really started to understand how much opportunity is out there and what a role that Giant Eagle can play in this, and what a role I can play in helping Giant Eagle do more. Mm-hmm. And since then, it's really become sort of a life mission of mine, simply because there are just so many people that win, and it frankly just feels so good to be able to help in this way. I have to say that I fully recognize that I am standing on the shoulders of giants. Giant Eagle has been hiring people who are differently abled for almost 40 years at this point.
That's awesome.
My work is in some ways pretty easy, as I said before, because the people who really got this off the ground 40 years ago, they really did the hard work by helping the company sort of get over its fear of what it's like to employ people who are differently able. Now, you can walk into any of our stores, and all of our store leaders and all of our team leaders and all of our team members welcome this concept with open arms.
My role is the Deputy Director of Employer and Innovation Services at Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities. And so part of our division is our business relations team. We have a team of business relations specialists who are headquartered throughout the state of Ohio. Their primary role is to engage with employers like Giant Eagle to promote hiring individuals with disabilities. They do that through providing services to those employers to help those employers and businesses become a more diverse and inclusive workforce. So that could range from training for staff on disability etiquette, disability awareness. We also have a worksite accessibility specialist on staff, and she does no-cost consultations for employers who are looking to make sure that their environments are as inclusive as possible. She can make suggestions about reasonable accommodations, assistive technology in the workplace, so that those companies can ensure that not only is that job more accessible for the individual, but in many cases, it can actually boost productivity for the entire company to implement some of these types of changes into the workplace. So we're really excited about being able to offer those types of services. One of the primary services that we provide to employers is recruitment assistance. So like with Giant Eagle, we get to learn about the types of positions that are in high demand for those employers, learn what those pre-hiring requirements may be, the skill sets that they're looking for a particular job. Take that information back to our counselors who are working throughout the state, share that information so that they can then work with the job seekers who are receiving services to make sure that they are prepared for those types of jobs, to make sure that they are a good fit for those types of jobs. And then we advocate on behalf of those individuals so that they can get an interview, get hired, and then we support the process throughout onboarding to make sure that that person is acclimating well to the job, getting the skills that they need to learn on the job. And we work with a network of providers throughout the state who then provide those services directly to those individuals.
What Kristen was talking about is so significant is because I just don't have the time or the expertise to figure out how to navigate what I think is actually a very complex sort of web of services out in the community, as well as find the right candidates, etc. And I've always thought one of the keys to helping Giant Eagle figure out how to employ more people who are differently abled is to figure out who the right partner is in the community, who essentially, once we open our doors and open our arms to the concept, to let them in. And just as Kristen said, figure out what the nature of our jobs are, give them access to everything they need to understand about what it takes to be successful at Giant Eagle, and then let them serve as sort of the primary function out in the community to go out, find the right people, just as you said, and help them through the sort of job prep process, help them through the screening process, and then once they get hired, of course, support them along the way. And I am fully convinced that we would not be nearly as successful as we are without partners like OOD. I think that OOD is incredibly progressive and has really figured out the fact that this paradigm shift needs to happen and really has figured out how to make it happen. And that's not something that you see every day.
Thanks. And so that is exactly why we started our business relations team, because we heard that same message from a lot of employers. Employers were telling us that they needed a more streamlined way to get access to that workforce that they needed to fill those types of positions. And they needed a primary point of contact that they could work with who would bring them the candidates and also bring that expertise and those other services, wraparound supports, et cetera, for the employer as well as the job seeker. And so our business relations team really views the employer as a second customer of OOD. So job seekers who come to us because they need services to be able to obtain employment are a huge customer of ours. Our second huge customer is our employer partners who come to us because they need access to that resource of those candidates, and then also all of the information that we can provide to make it easier, to make it a more streamlined process, and to help those companies be an inclusive workforce. So that is why we started our business relations team, why Director Miller saw that as a priority within the agency back in 2013 when we first did this.
And, just talking more specifically about how the partnership really works on the ground, the whole concept and really the most important part of sort of the mechanics is the fact that OOD has embedded what they call their talent sourcing coordinator into Giant Eagle. Now, they remain an employee of OOD, basically spend all of their time working at Giant Eagle in terms of finding candidates, helping our HR team help the candidates through the process, and then, as we mentioned before, supporting them while they're there. But it's this concept of embedding the professional that really makes the difference. Because if you don't have that, and you don't have the sort of the in at the company, it's really hard to understand how it all works. Right. And so the fact that OOD has been able to dedicate that person to us is really the key, I think.
Yeah.
Making it work day to day.
Right. So our talent sourcing coordinator, as Jeremy mentioned, is an employee of OOD, but he is fully embraced by the Giant Eagle human resources team and the store leaders and the team leaders at the Giant Eagle stores, where he sources candidates and provides support for those team members who need our services, and then also for the management, the supervisors, the team leaders at the stores. He's able to be a resource to them as well.
Yeah, and in fact, he has an office at our corporate office in Cleveland. We give him a Giant Eagle laptop. He has access to all of the sort of critical technology systems that he needs to be effective. Even though at the end of the day, he remains an OOD employee, our HR and operations staff really think of him as being part of the Giant Eagle team as well. And in fact, we give him business cards that say both Giant Eagle and OOD. So even to the community, he's really representing both organizations.
He has a Giant Eagle name badge.
He's a Giant Eagle name badge, which is an important part, even though it's really is just a name badge. It's really important that he sends the signal that he is acting as a representative of the company as well as OOD, because it just lends to his credibility and to his expertise.
Yeah. So he has access to the available positions. He knows the stores that are hiring. He knows the demand, especially at those stores that maybe have a hiring need that's greater than maybe another store. He's able to then take that information back to the vocational rehabilitation counselor who is serving the candidates, and can share information about the different types of jobs that are available. He can talk about what the demands are for that particular job. He can provide realistic expectations of what that job will require. And he spent a lot of time in Giant Eagle stores, so he knows all of those roles and he knows all of those positions. And then once a candidate applies for a position at Giant Eagle, he has the ability to track that person, see where they are in the hiring process, and can make sure that if that person needs any interviewing support or any type of wraparound support for that interview, he's able to make sure that that's provided to that person in a timely manner.
It's also important to say, from Giant Eagle's perspective, one of the key strategies of having this person embedded is that, I've always said to John, the talent sourcing coordinator, I want him to teach us how to fish rather than give us a fish. Everyone knows that old adage, but the real meaning and the real objective is to help increase our team's knowledge and expertise so that the next time an HR professional or a store leader or a team leader has a question about how best to work with someone who is differently abled, John is sort of sharing his expertise so the next time they don't have to go back to him. And so essentially lifting the whole team. I actually talked to him about, I want you to think of yourself as working yourself out of a job, even though I don't think there's ever a time that we won't need the embedded professional, because there's always turnover and there's always new people and always new questions. But it's sort of the mentality of the role, because I want him to not do the support himself necessarily, but teach people how best to support, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think the way that you've just described that exemplifies why Giant Eagle was awarded the Champion of Inclusion this year, because that truly is embedding inclusion within Giant Eagle. You want John to be able to make sure that those team leaders and store leaders are a natural support to the team member who's working at Giant Eagle, because that's the way that person is going to be included within the company. That's going to be the most natural way to support that person. We talk about natural supports as this kind of idea or concept or way to support a team member with a disability, but really everybody uses natural supports, whether they have a disability or they don't, in their workplace. And so this is just a model that truly makes sure that those team members are supported in the most natural and inclusive way possible.
Thank you for saying that. What Giant Eagle is really good at is that, like I said earlier, we many years ago got over our fear, and our store teams know why this is important, know why it's, listen, the fact is they have to run a good business. They need good people, and people who are differently abled make great team members. So they get why hiring people who are differently abled is important. The fact is that no two people who are differently abled are alike, and there are always questions that come up. There's always different kinds of situations. And so, we are at the point where we don't need help understanding why it's important to do this. What we need help with is sort of taking us to the next level. And as Kristen said, there are all sorts of little tidbits of information and little sort of bits of knowledge that each of our team leaders and store leaders and HR professionals need to know to really get us from what I think of as pretty good to great. Where I would love to see us go is we're pretty good at employing people who are differently abled in sort of our hourly roles in our stores. A dream of mine is to be able to figure out how to help people get into management, how to help people get into our corporate offices, how to help people get into our warehouses. To be able to do that, it's day by day increasing knowledge, increasing people's expertise. And John has been helping us in little ways and big. And over time, I know that we'll get there.
And can I ask, how long has John been a talent sourcing coordinator for Giant Eagle?
John has been a talent sourcing coordinator for, well, officially with OOD for, I guess, about 9 months now.
Since January.
Yeah. And I have to take that opportunity to brag about his work because John has, in 9, I think, relatively short months, has already placed 64 people, which is, as far as I'm concerned, unbelievable.
Great. That's great.
It's really
all in Ohio.
All in Northeast Ohio.
all in Northeast Ohio. Our retention rate is far better than I ever would have imagined. It's definitely better than sort of our general retention rate. We just couldn't be happier with his work. He also, I think, as Kristen mentioned earlier, focuses on how do we help current team members who are differently abled. People run into performance issues and other sort of challenges in their daily sort of work lives. John focuses on how to help them keep their jobs. If they're not already clients of OOD, one of the things he does is help them become a client, which I think is not very difficult. It doesn't take very much. Once they are a client, then he essentially goes in, he works with the team leader and the team member, of course, just to work through any issues that the team might be having. From my perspective, helping someone keep a job is just as important as helping someone find a job. That was something very important to us as we set up the relationship, and OOD has been totally supportive in that respect.
Yeah, that's actually a great benefit of having John work for the vocational rehabilitation agency, because not only can he make sure that team members who are already receiving OOD services can get access to the services that they need to be successful on the job. If there's a team member that's experiencing a disability, maybe has an onset disability, he's able to quickly meet with that person, get the documentation that he may need for eligibility, and then make sure that they're assigned to a counselor quickly so that we can engage them with our services, make sure that if they need a provider to provide on-the-job supports or rehab technology or something along those lines, he's able to make sure that that is taken care of quickly. So it's great to have him be embedded because he can help on kind of both ends, both the onboarding and then also for folks that are already there.
Above and beyond that, it's not always the person who's differently abled that needs the assistance. Sometimes, if a person's working in a produce department and we change the team leader, the person who's differently abled is used to working with, moves on to a different store, and then someone new comes in. Sometimes it's the new team leader that needs coaching. John is just excellent at providing that kind of coaching. The fact is, during a good economy, it is really hard to find good people. And, the fact that we have been able to hire 60 people in 9 months, really, I just think of it as, I can't believe that we're able to help the stores that way because, listen, the customers keep coming and our produce shelves need to be stocked and the grocery shelves need to be stocked and the registers need to be run and we couldn't do it without great team members. So, this is as far as I'm concerned, largely an untapped labor pool. We thankfully have figured out that it is good for our business and, of course, good for the team member. The first thing to remember is that you don't have to do this alone. If there is a company out there that has started to say, we understand that we should go hire people who are differently abled, but just don't necessarily either know where to get started or have gotten started, but may not be as successful as they'd like, it's just to remember that there are great agencies like OOD who are there to help. Like I said before, I know I am never going to be or have as much expertise as someone like Kristen or the people on her team. And frankly, that's not what Giant Eagle is paying me to do, right? I need to know enough to know that I should go work with someone like Kristen, but it would take years for me to build that kind of expertise. And so, as Kristen mentioned earlier, this concept of having a single point of contact in the community is just so critical for all the reasons that we've talked about.
So how can an employer get started, Kristen?
Oh, it's easy. First of all, you can find us on our website at ood.ohio.gov/employers. There are some lovely pictures of our business relations specialists on there, along with contact information. So we have 5 regional business relations specialists. They cover the entire state. They are geographically located. They are not working in Columbus. They work in cities all over the state of Ohio. And they would love to hear from businesses who are looking for our information and our expertise to help that employer build a more inclusive workforce. And they'll come out to your place of business, learn more about the types of jobs that you have availability, and take that information back and source some candidates who are qualified. Employer Partners of Inclusion Awards is based on a set of criteria, and we have 4 different award levels. So the highest is Champion of Inclusion, and of course, this year's Champion of Inclusion is Giant Eagle. And then there is a Platinum Award, a Gold Award, and a Silver Award. And those different levels of awards really just represent the level of diversity and inclusion for a particular employer partner. To be considered for an employer partner, the baseline is that that partner has hired at least 5 OOD job seekers within a year. And then we look at a number of other things that illustrate just best practices in diversity and inclusion. So do we have a sourcing relationship with that employer partner? Are we sourcing candidates for them? If we provided disability etiquette and awareness training, has that employer maybe participated in a job fair or a hiring event? Have we been able to tour that particular business to learn more about the types of jobs that they have? And those are kind of OOD specific. But then there are a number of other criteria that are specific to the employer. So does that employer provide information to new hires about diversity and inclusion? Does that employer have a written statement of diversity and inclusion that's publicly available? So those types of things that we use as criteria. And Giant Eagle hit all of the marks and then some. The 5 hires within the year-long evaluation period we just mentioned, in the first 9 months of our partnership, there have been more than 60. So clearly you've far exceeded that goal, Jeremy.
And that is just in Northeast Ohio.
And that's just in Northeast Ohio.
Doesn't
exactly.
include Columbus.
Doesn't include Columbus
Right.
and surrounding areas.
Right. Obviously, it's great to be recognized in this way, and it's a huge honor for us. I will tell you, though, that we are typically too modest, and we're certainly not in this work to win awards. That's not why we're doing this. I think the best part about being recognized as a champion of inclusion is that hopefully we can leverage it to be a role model for other companies out there, and to show that it is possible to be successful at employing people who are differently abled, that is possible to figure out how to get started, how to, as I mentioned, get over your fear, and start sort of trying to crack the code. Because it takes work to figure it out. I am just so thankful that Giant Eagle does this work. I'm thankful that I personally have the opportunity to do this important work. And, although, I mentioned earlier that it's sort of a personal mission of mine to help figure out how Giant Eagle can employ as many people who are differently abled as possible, I also feel like it's a mission of mine to help as many companies figure out how to do this. Because I know that if we can leverage our knowledge and expertise to help other companies figure this out, the power of this work will grow exponentially. And so, for what it's worth, I offer myself up to anyone who wants to talk to me about this, because I'm here to help. My email address is jeremy.shapira@gianteagle.com. I am happy to talk with anyone who is interested.
Jeremy, Kristen, thank you so much.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you. It's a wonderful opportunity.
A transcript of today's episode is available at ood.ohio.gov/podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating and review. We're on social media at Ohio OOD. Do you have a disability? Do you want a job? We can help. oodworks.com.